What's up, guys? My name is Isaac Poti, and I'm the host of the podcast called Tales from the Tailboard. Today, my guest is Gary, the ER nurse.
I'm gone. Don't ask me why. No motive, no good.
Before we get rolling, I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, End of Shift Apparel. Built by first responders for first responders, and they make gear that actually hits home, on shift or off. You can grab their stuff at endofshiftapparel.com, and you can use my code Tailboard10 to get 10% off. Big thanks to Tim and his crew for supporting Tales from the Tailboard and what they're building over there. Gary, today on Tales from the Tailboard, I'm joined by someone who spent years working the front lines of emergency medicine and now uses his platform to pull back the curtains on what really happens behind those doors. He's an ER nurse, a storyteller, and the voice behind the call light. Gary, the ER nurse. Gary, it's great to have you here, man. Let's start with the story. How this all start for you?
In terms of healthcare, I got into healthcare as an EMT in 2004. My first wife had been established in EMS and as a firefighter. And when we got married, she encouraged me to come along on that journey. And so I did. I became a firefighter and EMT and enjoyed that. It was a rural agency, so we did a lot of a lot of farm area. So we're near interstate, so we did a lot of NBCs. We did a lot of like structure fires, like usually barns, those kind of things. And then some rural emergency medicine, like things that happen on the farm that you can imagine. And I did that for several years, and then things didn't work out in that marriage. I drifted away from the EMS, and then in my second marriage, which we've been married for almost 15 years now, and I changed gears and completely changed careers. Like I had done broadcast journalism for a number of years. I worked in higher education, government contractors, and then my wife got sick, and she's fine. Like she's fine now, but she got sick and she required some surgery and she required rehabilitation. And so I was taking care of her. And during that process, she joked, she said, "Oh, you make a really good nurse." And I said, "Well, I love you. I don't know if I want to do this for everybody." But lo and behold, I actually did kind of have this passion that she'd recognized. And so we worked it out, and I was able to go back to school full time just for a couple of years. I did all the prereqs in community college and then enrolled at a four-year university for 2 years and graduated with a BSN in 2016. I'm in year 10 of being a nurse, 1 year in ICU, and 8.5 years as an ER nurse. And then in 2017, as a nurse, I was able to challenge at the state to get my EMT basic license back. So I just had to do the 40 CE, took the written test, and got my certification back. And I've been running for the last 8 years now with a local agency.
That's amazing. So when you say you have your EMT basic, so you're running with a local agency, are you still doing first response on top of nursing?
Yeah, so I do that as a volunteer. I am very fortunate that we live in an area with a very large volunteer agency, and there are not that many left, but we have the benefit of having 3 medical schools that constantly feed med students they come in as EMTs, a lot of them get their paramedic, but it's their way of getting that patient contact, right? So we constantly have a new influx. We have 150 active members. We haven't turned over a first team call in probably 3 years. And we have 6 ambulances. We have swift water rescue, cave rescue, rope rescue, trench rescue. We do all of it. And we're very fortunate, and we're a very rare entity these days when it comes to EMS, right? You see local agencies closing all the time because they just don't have the volunteers.
And obviously, not to give away personal information like the city you're in, but what state are you coming from?
In the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Commonwealth of Virginia. All right. So when you're on that truck, I assume your nursing license doesn't play a role there.
It does not.
Okay.
In the Commonwealth of Virginia, the only time a nurse can practice to their full scope is if it is a critical care transport. So let's say I'm working in the emergency department. We get a patient who is very ill and needs a higher level of care, and the ALS crew that comes to transport them says, nope, that's not a drip that I'm comfortable with. You need to send a nurse. I can get on that ambulance, practice to my full scope, and help transport that patient to the higher level of care. Outside of that, nurses cannot practice at their scope in an EMS agency.
Wow. All right. I didn't know if you couldn't scale down but scale up. I didn't know how that was for you. I know that you can have both EMT or paramedic and nursing here because I know a lot of in Oklahoma we have a lot of paramedics that like to go paramedic bridge to RN,
Right.
and that's what gets me into interviewing nurses like yourself because I mean a lot of people came from those backgrounds to be nurses, so they have both sides of the coin here. They know what it's like on both sides, and not just a nurse and only a nurse who has no idea what first response looks like.
True. And again, my agency, we're very fortunate because a lot of our volunteers work at the local hospital. So we have a lot of nurses that also do EMS. So most of us are EMT basics, but a lot of them are paramedics. And I want to go back and address one other thing. The only other instance where a nurse can practice to their full scope is on HEMS, like on a fixed wing or like a helicopter. Then they can practice, but on a ground transport, only for critical care ground transport can they practice their full scope. But I can't go to a local EMS agency and then start IVs as a nurse. I'd have to go back and become either an advanced or a paramedic.
That makes 100% sense and probably is the safest for all levels involved. You had mentioned like becoming a nurse because your wife made a joke about, hey, you'd make a good nurse. So is that the only thing that was planned, or is it something you like eventually fell into?
Well, so she approached me about it, and I thought she was joking, but my wife is a type A personality. She's a CPA, and she had already kind of done a lot of the number crunching. Like, could I leave my job? Could we survive on one salary? She had looked at average salaries in the area, right? And she knew that I wasn't really happy with where I was working. I didn't feel like I was. There was that sense of community service that was missing. I didn't feel like at the end of the day, what I was doing for a living was contributing anything to society, right? And I'm getting to that age where I want to leave a mark. I want to help people. And so she recognized that, and I think she said, with your background in EMS, you've done EMS, you've taken care of people, you have a basic understanding of, how to take vital signs, recognizing sick versus not sick, those kind of things. And so, I mean, it wasn't like an immediate thing like, oh, I dropped everything and went back to nursing school, right? I said, well,
Mhm.
let me take some courses at the community college. Let me reach out to the university that has a nursing program, see what courses at the local community college they will accept, which ones I can transfer from my previous degree, which wasn't a lot because it had been 17 years since I graduated, and usually 10 is the cutoff. Anything over 10, you got to take it over again. They did let me keep like psychology and sociology and statistics, but all of the science classes, chemistry, micro, um, and there's a couple other science classes in there. I had to take those over again and start over. So I did that for like a year and a half, and then applied to get in. Then once I got that role, and I thought, oh, like I can see myself doing this, right? I started looking more into the
Mhm.
nursing aspect of it, and so I applied and got in, and enrolled in May 2014, graduated in May 2016.
That's awesome. Do you consider yourself, even with all the struggles you've been through, lucky, or is it just grit and hard work that got you through it?
I think well, definitely hard work was a lot of it, right? So going back to school as an adult with responsibilities, married with children, there is, I think, an added layer of stress when you go back, right? There is zero room for failure. You have left a job, you're living on one income, things are tight. My wife is having to pick up a lot of slack, right? Like I'm in
Mhm.
school a lot, she's got to pick up a lot of slack. So the pressure, I think, is a little bit more, and you understand that more as somebody who's older. When I was 18 and going to college for the first time, paying my own way, there was different kind of stressors, and I didn't fully appreciate it at the time because I was young and dumb. I didn't know anything. Uh,
Mhm.
but yeah, so I think being older definitely gave it a different perspective.
Good. And at what age did you start that?
I was 38 when I started taking all the
30.
prereqs. 39 when I enrolled as basically a junior at a 4-year college, and I was 41 when I graduated.
Did you think at, say, 35 that you would ever see yourself back in school?
No. I thought about it a couple times, like, should I go get my MBA? Should I go back to grad school or whatever? But never in a million years did I think I would go back and become a nurse. That was so far off my radar.
Well, we're happy you have done it because you are a great personality on TikTok. You have great insights, and you just, I mean, I fell into you through TikTok. And I mean, I would say we have opposing views on some things, but
Sure.
uh, I think that's what makes the best of all of us is that if we are opposing in some ways, we can still get along. We learn from each other. If you're learning
Agreed.
from someone who's exactly like you, you're not learning anything. The way you handle a patient may be different from the way I handle a patient. And if I see you work and I hear your stories about how you work, that's going to only improve myself. So
Agreed.
it's kind of like the old saying, be careful on what you say because it may fall upon deaf ears. Definitely not with me. Um, I like to soak up and listen, and that's exactly why I started this podcast because this is how I learn. I listen to your stories, and I take that into. And I was just telling somebody else while I was editing their episode. I said I listen to these episodes as I'm breaking it into parts about a dozen, if not more times, and it's like so I'm consistently hearing it over and over and over. So if it to tell you that it's not drilled in my head is an understatement. So whatever we say here today, trust me, if you want to teach me something, I will learn. And I hope that everybody else that watches this podcast from now on, I hope they learn something, and I hope they can take it with them. And maybe somebody who's also 35, 38 years old who isn't happy in their career goes, you know what, I think I want to try nursing, and maybe they just might fall in love with it as well. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, and I feel like when I do my live TikToks, I feel like there's always somebody that comes in who is in their 40s, their 50s, their 30s, going back to nursing school or asking, like, I am this age, can I go back to nursing school? And my answer is always yes. Like, if that is what is calling you, then that's what you should do. And I don't think any age is too old to go back to school to do anything in
yeah.
reality, not just nursing, but anything. If that's what you're feeling drawn to, I think you should pursue that.
Lifelong learner, the badge that a lot of us like to hold over us, uh, doesn't mean anything. It's not a lifelong sentence. I mean, you know, you get a life sentence in court, now that's 40 years. But as a lifelong learner, that's forever. You know, that's not 40 years. That's 50, 60, 70. I mean, if you think of some of the most successful people in entrepreneurship or anywhere where they've made big things happen for them, Colonel Sanders didn't get successful until he was 60. I mean, when he started KFC. So, I mean, look at where that's at. And so if those people can do those things, so can we. We can achieve and do better for ourselves along with everybody else. And I just appreciate learning from you and with your wisdom. And I wanted to breach on kind of maybe back up. You had mentioned that you, or at least in your lives where I met you, you talked about being a TV host.
Yeah. So my first career was broadcast journalism. I got my start in radio in 1991, and I was 16 years old. There was a program through the high school where we were in a very large area, so all the high schools had this program, radio and television. And so kids from all the different schools that were interested would hop on a bus. We'd go to this communication center, and this is where we did our classes. And there was a television and a radio class. I took the radio class, and I had a wonderful teacher who I still keep in touch with today. She's long since retired. She lives down in Florida, and I still keep in touch with her. She has like this whole following of former students. That's how much of an impact she made on us, is that we still keep in touch with her, and she has her own like Facebook fan club from all of her graduates over the years. And so she was really the catalyst for me getting into journalism, right? She fed that desire. I knew very early on I was an athlete, but I was not the greatest athlete. And I knew very early on that high school would be the extent of my athletic career, right? But I still love sports, so I wanted to do something with that. So I chose to do broadcasting and ended up going to Virginia Tech for communications, and went on to a career in broadcast journalism with television, worked at 3 different NBC affiliates. I've done some amazing things as a journalist that most will never get to do in their lives. I have covered the White House. I have covered the Redskins. I have done college football. You know, all these things that I dreamt of doing as a high school kid, I got to do those things. The downside to that is it doesn't pay well at all. I mean, like not even a little bit. It does not pay well. And so I ended up having, for financial reasons, I had to get out of it. So I got into corporate communications, doing a lot of the same things, just for like a Fortune 500 company. And then got out of that, worked for another smaller company, and then got into higher education, doing a lot of the same communication stuff. And that's when it transitioned over into the nursing, which is what we kind of talked about earlier.
Yeah. So on that topic, you described yourself as both a clinician and a communicator. How did those paths interact?
Well, I think being a communicator and having that background, it comes natural to interview people, to try and get to the root of the story. So particularly helpful when you're dealing with maybe a patient who can't answer questions appropriately, they're altered for whatever reason. Interviewing the family, like that comes naturally to me after having done what I, worked in communications. So interviewing people is a very good skill to have, and I found that translated very well into medicine. Speaking with doctors, speaking with other clinicians from different, specialties, all that experience that I had interviewing people and talking to people and trying to find out what the real story is, or trying to get them to give me the answer that I'm looking for, right? To phrase the question in such a way that it's gonna elicit the response that I'm looking for, the information that I need. So I think that definitely came in handy. And then of course here doing TikTok Live and starting a podcast, that was literally the best of both worlds. You take the communication side of it, the broadcast journalism, the radio, and then you take the nursing knowledge and the healthcare and the EMS, and you put those together. And that was what initially was the catalyst for starting the podcast, Beyond the Call Light. And I am not the smartest nurse. I'm not the best nurse. I'm not the best EMT. What I am pretty good at is finding people who are smarter than me and getting them to share their knowledge with the rest of us. And that's what the podcast is all about.
Exactly. And I kind of feel like I do the same thing on the EMT fire level. And I just try to do as good as I can. And I think that was a fabulous answer that you gave. Being a communicator and clinician, you're good at what you do and you know how to communicate it. I think that's the best of both worlds. It kind of leads into if you can't explain it, you really don't know how to do it. And because you can communicate it, then it makes you that much better of a clinician, because now you're thinking of the bits and pieces and the puzzle pieces that go together that say, okay, well, I can do this skill. I've learned how to do this skill. Now, how do I talk about it? And then you get into that on your podcast and on your lives, and you'll have certain topics that you go over, and it's just the way it gets explained by your fan base and how you encourage them is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So
thank you.
props on that.
Thank you.
Moving on to another question here. Before Beyond the Call Light, what was an early lesson that shaped your approach in healthcare?
Oh, well, I think in my very first year as a nurse, I was working in an ICU. It's a 10-bed ICU at a smaller community hospital. And I learned very early on as a healthcare practitioner to trust but verify. And that's a message that I preach regularly to new EMTs, new nurses, nursing students, those pursuing a career in healthcare. And that is to trust but verify. You're going to get a lot of people who you look up to or that you understand have more experience. And too often, I think it is easy for new people in this industry to take at face value what somebody who has more experience tells us. And that is not what I recommend. And that's why I say trust but verify. Trust what they're saying, but you should go look that up. You should make sure that that is accurate information. And it's not that they're sharing information that is inaccurate on purpose. It could just be that what they learned has changed over the years, especially if you're working with somebody who's been at this for 20, 30 years, right? What they learned 20, 30 years ago has likely changed. And maybe they just didn't know. Maybe they have not, seen the updates or seen the new research or the new evidence. So whenever I got burned on this, and it wasn't anything major, but I ended up looking kind of silly because I repeated what I was told and it turned out not to be accurate. And I learned very quickly, okay, somebody tells me something, I'm going to kind of put that on the back burner until I can verify it. And that's what I tell, and that's what I preach to new EMTs and new nurses, new doctors, anybody that comes through and is new to healthcare.
Is that on us or is that on them? I mean, if we're meant to be leaders in the field, is
Right.
it does it fall on us because we didn't teach the quote unquote educator the new way to do things?
Well, I think it's a combination of both, right? So if you are charged with educating somebody who's new, so say you are an EMT who is precepting another EMT, or you're a nurse that's orienting a new nurse, right? If you are taking on that mantle, then you are responsible for making sure the information that you are telling them is as accurate as you can make it to be, right? As you know it to be. And so I feel like, yes, there is a responsibility to make sure what you are teaching people is accurate. Now, what I do is I tell them trust but verify. So I'm going to tell you what I know to be true based on the evidence. However, you still need to verify that, right? You still, because I'm not the one that put you through nursing school. I'm telling you what I know to be true, but that doesn't mean that there wasn't a survey or a study that came out last week that's completely changed everything that we know in a particular topic, right? And at the same time, as somebody who is learning, and I found this to be true in nursing school, I'd have professors tell me something, and then I would go to look it up and say, that doesn't really sound right. And I'm going to go look it up, and it turned out not to be true. For example, we had a professor who told us, and she was older, but she told us if you have a nursing thing on your license plate that designates you as a nurse, you are legally obligated to stop at the scene of an accident and render aid. And I said, I don't think that's a thing. I'm pretty sure that's not true. So I go and look it up and it's not true. But if I hadn't done that, I would have taken that at face value. I may have spread misinformation. So I don't know what her rationale was for that, if that was a rule at some point, but it's not a rule that I've ever been familiar with. But that's one of those cases where, and I'm just glad it wasn't anything serious like a medication or something like that. So,
No, I mean, if you think about it this way, what if somebody just borrowed your car?
true.
And I mean, and so they're expected to help. And it's like, no, they don't have that ability.
Right. And that's why,
So-
as soon as she said it, I was like, wait a minute. I don't know about that.
Exactly. So I'm going to lead into this question with, do you feel like you're the same now as you were before, or have you changed as a nurse?
Before I became a nurse?
Yeah, let's say the first 2 years versus now.
Well, yes. I mean, I hope I am.
Yeah. I mean, not so much of the learning aspect, because we all get better and learn as we go. I mean, attitude and how you perceive yourself as a person being a nurse.
Wow. Okay, so that's a loaded question because that's going to be different for everybody, and I will tell you there's so many factors at play. COVID changed a lot. Like COVID was for a healthcare worker, particularly in the front lines, and I started at a smaller community hospital and then moved to a level 1 trauma center. And I was at a level 1 trauma center during Delta wave. Delta was the worst of them, right? We saw more, and we're on TikTok, so I got to be careful what I say, but we saw more patients pass away during that time than at any other time during that pandemic, right? That took a toll on most clinicians that I know in some respect, whether it's their mental health, whether I feel like my beard got a lot grayer a lot quicker. I have a picture of myself right when the pandemic started, and my beard's almost all black, and then within 2 years, it is like turning gray and white, right? And I think a lot of that was stress, right? I got real sick during COVID. I, didn't work for 3 months. I was on oxygen. I had double pneumonia. There were 3 or 4 nights I wasn't sure I was going to wake up, right? And that changes how you examine your life, right? You learn to appreciate things more. And as I've gotten older, especially being a second career nurse, I'm almost 51 years old. I understand that I'm on the back half, right? Like I've lived the majority of my life and I have fewer years left than I've lived, right? If you go by the statistics, right? So my time's limited. And even though I know I probably have a good 30, hopefully 35 years left, if I'm lucky, I understand that I'm running out of time and I need to make the most impact I can. And so I feel like I'm a different person now for many reasons. One, COVID changed things, but two, I have seen so much as a nurse and a EMT in terms of people losing loved ones, right? And you appreciate your loved ones even more, right? You're grateful uh, for the time that you have with them, and that's probably not something I would appreciate as much had I not gotten into nursing. And so, yes, I'm much more empathetic now, I think,
Good.
than I was then. And I think that's probably one of the biggest changes, taking away the education and gaining the knowledge that you were talking about that we should all be doing as we get further in our career.
Well, with that being said, every nurse has a story that defined their career.
Uh,
What is yours?
Shoo, man, uh, that's a tough one to get to without getting emotional. But I'm gonna work my way through this one, man. I was an
Don't
ICU
worry.
nurse.
If you do, just have at it.
So I've told this story a few times, and it's hard to get through it uh, without taking some deep breaths. But I'll give you the short version of it. I was in my first year as a registered nurse. I was working in an ICU. We had this fairly young female patient, 30s ish, which is, I consider that to be very young, especially considering everything that was going on. And this was one of these worst case scenarios, maxed out on pressors, intubated, all the things were like just drew the short stick on everything, right? And it was not looking good. Like, this was a very traumatic experience for the nurses, the physicians, obviously the family and their significant other. And it got to the point where we had to transfer this patient out to a higher level of care. We had them for several days. We had reached the end of our expertise and they needed a higher level of care. And I want to say they needed ECMO or something like that. And we didn't do ECMO where we were. So we had to ship them out. And then once you ship them out, as you know, you rarely find out what happens, right? You have no idea. And HIPAA protects a lot of that. So we can't find out what happens. But then many months later, this woman comes into the ER, right? And not as a patient. She was looking for people, and somebody had directed her to me. And I have no idea who this woman is, right? And it's her.
We're listening, man. We got you.
Every time. But she made it, and
Awesome. Nothing
she
but
just
love,
came.
man.
She and her husband just came to say thank you. Deep breath. So that was the validation that I made the right choice to do what I do.
Thanks for sharing, man. I
Every
appreciate
time
it.
that story gets me, every time I think one year I'm going to get through it.
It shows how human you are, and we appreciate you. Trust me.
All right. Appreciate that.
So we kind of already reached this one, but maybe touch on it just a little bit and,
Yeah.
kind of reset here. How has your view of healthcare evolved since day one, like EMT, since everything?
Oh, man. Oh, so I would say it has, I think it's like finding out how the sausage is made. you know, like everything from like cost to, um, people being uninsured or families having to make decisions between like eating and medicine, right? Life-saving medicine. These are the things that you don't necessarily appreciate unless you are experiencing it personally or if you work in healthcare, right? I am fortunate that nobody in our family requires any life-saving medication that costs a ton of money, right? Nobody needs insulin in my family. Nobody needs, cancer medication or treatments or anything like that. But there are people that deal with it every day, and they understand the stresses of that. I did not until I got into healthcare, and I think that is probably one of the things that makes me feel the most helpless as a clinician, because when people say, how much is that going to cost, or how much does that scan cost, or how much is this med to pick up at the pharmacy, I don't know, and it's not my area of expertise, but those are questions I get a lot, and I think that changed my perception of where we're at with healthcare, right? These families that are having to decide between getting enough food on the table or paying rent and and having to get medications that their child or their family member needs. And I think that really opened my eyes to a lot of the systemic problems that we have in our healthcare system. And for many years, I would say the healthcare system is broken, but I've been confronted on that from many different fronts from other people who say it's not actually broken. It is working as intended, and it is a for-profit capitalistic system, right? These are owned by healthcare corporations and for-profit pharmaceutical companies. Their responsibilities to their stockholders, right? They're there to make money. That is what they do. And as long as that is the goal for that company, then patient care and healthcare worker safety is never going to be the priority, at least in my opinion.
Agreed. Man, you are touching on some topics that I hope sparks a lot of comments. I mean, I know we've talked about this in detail, and the reason for this podcast is to get everybody else involved as well. We're going to move into section 2, going into Beyond the Call Light, asking you more about that. What inspired you to start Beyond the Call Light?
It was kind of this thing I'd been kicking around for several years, right? I had this background in journalism, radio. I started being much more active on TikTok, social media, trying to do some education, try to help people in their journeys wherever they were, whether it was EMS or in nursing. And then I started getting really active in TikTok and built a pretty decent following over like 6 years, 29,000. And then that account was taken away for whatever reason, and we're still in the process of trying to get it back, but it wasn't going to slow me down. I got right back on here, same day, created a new account, got right back at it, right? And a lot of the same people that helped me get out there and promote the messages that we were trying to promote, whether it was mental health awareness, whether it was how to survive nursing school, being a second career nurse, they helped me get that message back out there, right? And they are boosting me back up again. And it was actually one of the nurses that I'd worked with, who now is back at he used to be a flight nurse for many years, and he came to work with us for a little bit, but he missed flight so much he decided to go back to flight. So he's back flying again. But he told me, he was one day, he's like, man, you really should just like start a podcast or something. Like, I've seen your TikToks, you do a really good job of like explaining things and whatnot. So you should do that. And that kind of stuck in my brain, and I kicked it around for a long time. And then I finally, like this summer, I was like, I think he's right. I think I need to do this. So I started mapping things out. I started following other creators who were doing podcasts. Paramedic to RN John Smith was huge in helping me get up and running, right? He's made a lot of the mistakes, and he's helped me avoid some of those, whether it's equipment, software, all those things. He really helped me along the way. And one of the things I love about the community that you see here on TikTok, that you are part of, that I'm a part of, is how much we lift each other up, right? And how much we don't gatekeep information, right? It's not a competition. We are all here to try and help other people. And if we can help somebody else, that's great. And so when I see these creators who are coming up from behind me and they're, didn't have as many followers, and then when they pass me, it's because they're making great content, right? It's not a competition, and I cheer them on. I want them to succeed, right? I want them because they've got a good message. And so that is one of the reasons that, those people cheering me on are the ones that got me to over that hump of the fear of coming out with a podcast. Because there's a lot that goes into it. And you don't realize it, even when people tell you, when you sit down and actually do it, you don't understand how much work goes into it, right? Almost all of us are operating at a loss. Nobody makes any money off of this unless you're a really big
I'm not making money, that's for sure.
Right. We do it because we're passionate about it, because we want to share information. Yeah. We want to try and help people and share other people's messages.
So with that being said, you talked about lifting us up as a team and everything. And guys, I just want to inform you, I see what you're doing in the chat. I appreciate you guys. Love you. Thank you for being a part of my team. You sending me the heart me's, just joining the gifts. I see it all. Trust me. Just for the sake of taking this live, downloading it, and then editing it into a full episode for YouTube. A lot of the YouTube's people may not understand TikTok or get it. So I tend to not interact with the podcast lives, but I will do lives myself, yes. However, I don't interact when I'm trying to do a live recording. However, I do say that if you are in the comments and you have a question, as long as Gary's not talking, I will ask him that question. If there is something that you want to know, please feel free, ask the questions. That's why I want to do this live, is for one, to reach people that I can't reach. It is very hard to kind of go to Virginia to see him in person. So, I can pop up a live recording, invite him here, and I'm in Oklahoma and he's in Virginia, and we can do this easily. So if wherever you're from, you could be from all over the world. If you got a question and you want to ask it. And then I'll read it. And even if he can see it, which he can, and he gets to it before I do, feel free. Ask and it shall be answered. So after we reset here, how do you decide what stories that you're going to tell and what you keep secret?
Well, first and foremost, always HIPAA compliant. I think so. I take this question as like when I come home, right? Like when I come home and I try to tell my wife about my day, right? We don't tell them everything because some of the things that we see are not things that you want to burden other people with, right? But in terms of social media, the only things I share are the things that I think people can learn from, right? Whether it was a mistake that I made, whether it is a mistake that I caught. I did a story, I did a podcast story where I caught an error that was made by both a physician and then approved by a pharmacist. And it was only because I wasn't familiar with that medication that I went to Up to Date, which is the program that we use to guide our clinical practice. And I went to Up to Date to look this medication up because it was not something that I was familiar with. And anytime you're not familiar with a medication, you better look it up and know it front and back before you give it. And what I was reading directly contradicted what was ordered to be given. And I called the pharmacist and I said, this is what I'm seeing in Up to Date, and this does not match what has been ordered and what you approved. I need clarification, please. And after some back and forth, they realized that they had made a mistake. It was one of these drugs that had a similar name, sounded like, and that's what they read it as, and they approved it. And so they were going to tell me to push a medication that needs to be given over 30 minutes over like an IV push. And the results can be catastrophic, right? That medication can drop their blood pressure to nothing over nothing real quick. That's why it has to be given over a long period of time. Patient has to remain supine 30 minutes after the infusion because of the hypotension risk. And that is a story I will share because that saved a life. And it was not because I was super smart and knew the medication. It's because I didn't know the medication. And that's what I try to teach people. So the only stories I share are the ones that I think people will get something from.
And someone wanted to ask a question. They said, what's your goal cadence for your podcast? I'm assuming they mean, are you going to be dropping them weekly, monthly?
So I think initially it's going to be like twice a month, like every other week. It really depends on how often I can find guests that I think are going to, provide educational content, right? The recording themselves don't take that long, an hour maybe, but the post-production is where most of the work is put in. So it's a matter of, and then of course I have a full-time job. I volunteer at the rescue squad. I have 2 kids. I have a grown child who is out west, right? But we're a busy family. We always have something going on. So I thought twice a month, every other week is a reasonable goal in the beginning. Now, I've recorded a bunch of episodes. So the next episode comes out tomorrow, which for those that are listening to the podcast version of this is going to be the 31st, Halloween, right? So tomorrow morning, the interview that I did with Christopher from the Blakery content is coming out. It's already done. I just got to render it and upload it to my platform, and it'll publish tomorrow morning. But then after that, I think it's going to be an every other week situation until I get into a flow, until I can book these guests out far enough in advance where we can do it once a week. So
kind of feel bad because I'm like sort of in the same concept here, podcaster versus podcaster here. I've got 2 in the bank now. You'll be 3, and 4 on Saturday, and possibly a 5th on Saturday. But after you on Saturday, I'm going to be interviewing Nurse Andrea Law. She was in the chat, blowing it up earlier.
I saw her down there.
I've interviewed the mental health medic, which he is fantastic.
Yep,
you want to talk about identity? That was amazing. So on that note, what is, you breached on it, but I want to know, like, specifically, what is the one thing you hope your listeners take away from your podcast?
I would say I hope they take away that if we slow down and we take the time to teach each other, we can make this world a much better place across the board. I try to do that, and I'm not saying that I'm 100% there all the time, but I think in this world, not just in healthcare, I think we're all so busy and trying to move on to the next thing. And again, this comes with age, I think, being older and whatnot, but slowing down, take the time to teach somebody something. You might make a world of difference. You might be that one person that changes the trajectory of their life. It's, the butterfly effect, right? You take the time to explain something to them or answer their question, and that sets them on a course that you may never know the result of. But you can make a very positive impact if we just take a minute, take the time to answer those questions in full and give them our full attention. And with cell phones and social media and all the distractions, I think that is something that we are losing as a society, and particularly in healthcare, where science changes how we practice medicine every single day. So I would say, hope they take away, just slow down, take the time to teach somebody. We could change lives that way.
Absolutely. I'm often met with criticism because I do TikTok content and a firefighter. Some criticism is, well, you haven't been doing it that long. You have nothing to offer. Some criticism is, you shouldn't be doing that. It looks bad on your company, and so on and so on. And I say, there's people out there in the world, like somebody who in the comments just a minute ago mentioned, they said, hey, I want to be an EMT. This is where people get their information. This is where they want to consume the knowledge. Right. Yes, being in a classroom is substantial and it needs to happen, but that person isn't ever going to step foot in that classroom unless they feel comfortable enough to do so.
Right.
Sorry. There we go. That's why I hate connecting to the car, because it likes to... I'll get phone calls and everything else. But like, if that student isn't comfortable enough before they ever step into that classroom, they're not going to do it. Because nowadays, it's not like it used to be. It's before we had the internet, before we had these phones and whatnot, it was, in order to find out, you had to actually go to find out. Now it's with the technology literally in your hands. That's where it's at. I mean, you are learning before you're learning, if that makes any sense.
Sure. Yeah. You have the world at your fingertips, literally with a smartphone. You can look up anything. There's zero reason not to have the knowledge, to speak about something and not know the facts. You can easily look those up, right?
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Do you see it as education, advocacy, or something completely different?
You talking, in what regard? Do I see what as advocacy?
Your podcast.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I hope so. I certainly hope so. Like I said, I'm not the smartest nurse, but I can find smarter nurses and clinicians and bring them on to speak more intelligently about things that I'm not as familiar with. So I do think that it advocates for that. Um, and I hope that we reach a broad audience, people that may be of different mindsets, and we'll deal with some more, I wouldn't say controversial, but maybe some more, um, I guess, more, I wouldn't say controversial, but maybe some more, um, I guess, things, we're going to deal with things like alcoholism. We're going to deal with things like depression and SI, those kind of things. These are the things that we're not talking enough about, right? And these are the things that I think are important. So we're gonna talk about that. So right now we're keeping it kind of broad. We're talking about flight nursing. We're talking about financial education, financial literacy, those kind of things. But I think going forward, I want to get deeper into the things that are really affecting us, and mental health advocacy is definitely one of the big things. So I says the live is paused. Creator will be back soon. So I guess it's a good opportunity to say hi in the comments below. Strawberry Girl, hello. Luther V still in the house. What's up, man? I see mental health medic in there. I encourage my students to be the dumbest person in the room. Yes. So Christopher from the Blakery content and I spoke about this, right? And we were both in agreement that if you are the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. You need to go find a room where there are smarter people, because that's where you're going to do your learning, right? That's where you're going to learn new things. And I constantly try to do that. I'm very grateful that we have a chief in the emergency department who is very passionate about staying up to date on the current evidence-based practices, right? When I got to this ER, we had a lot of older physicians who were not changing with the times. And I would push back and I would lose. And then when she came on board, like I went to her and I was like, we got to change these things. And she's like, you're absolutely right. We've got to change these things. And she made those things happen because she's the chief. She can do more than I can. So, and it was great.
We've been going for about 45 minutes or so. Do you want to kind of wrap this up, or you go for a couple more questions?
Yeah, go for it. I got time for a couple more.
Okay. So let's look at the road ahead. Where do you see Beyond the Call Lights going?
Well, hopefully it will continue. I mean, as the more I do it, the easier it gets, right? Like you learn the process. I learned how to do the editing. I learned, the subtle techniques that I need to do. So this process becomes more streamlined. As soon as that becomes more streamlined and becomes less burdensome, that opens me up to start doing more promotion, maybe some advertising, but more importantly, like getting the message out there, trying to find these next level guests, right? The next guest. I've got, I guess, 6 episodes that have, one that's published, one's publishing tomorrow. I've already have 4 others that are already recorded, and then I have 3 more interviews that are scheduled. So, that's 9 episodes already, and that's great. If you're doing 2 a month, man, that's like 4.5 months. That's great. But my hope is that it will reach a broader audience. And as you reach more people, you're helping educate others. And then you're also getting people that are going to give you feedback on it. Maybe some suggestions that are going to make it better. And that's ultimately what I hope will happen. And then I will be able to grow this podcast, get a good following. Maybe I can get some really big names on here and, some experts in the field. Not necessarily popular people, but people who are experts in their field, like big experts, like that are dealing with big problems, right? And that's my hope.
Well, that's good, man. I really hope. I wish the best for you, and I'm going to be watching all of your episodes and commenting and liking and pushing you forward. And don't be afraid to get out there and ask for sponsorship. I mean, I'm not paid by any means, but Intersect Apparel, I just kind of reached out to him and I was like, hey, man, you think maybe we could work together and do something? And he was like, yeah, man, for sure. So, cool. And the reason why I wanted to work with him is because he's done so much pushing my content, sharing stuff, getting it out there and doing stuff. And I just wanted to repay him with hopefully getting him business. And, if I can, basically pawn him off onto every ear that I can, maybe they will get more business.
Right.
So, tit for tat, shall we? What impact do you hope to leave on the field?
I touched on this on a post shift that I did the other night. That was an absolute train wreck, but it actually turned out to be one of the funniest posts I've ever done. Completely unintentional, right? And that is, I think we take for granted how much impact we can have with a very short, simple interaction with somebody who is new to the field. And the example I gave was a medical student, MS3, getting really into the clinical aspect of it. The first 2 years are a lot of didactic kind of like stuff in the classroom, and then they get out and do a lot more in the field. So this medical student was learning how to do IVs. And anytime you have a student and you have a busy ER, a student is going to slow you down, right? And that's where we get into this big hurry. Well, we got these things to do. We've got to do all these tasks, and I don't necessarily have time to teach this person. If we take that approach to it, then we could set the wrong tone for this person, right? This is their first interaction, or one of their very first interactions with a nurse, or whatever your specialty is, right? And instead, I take the approach of, okay, what do you want to learn? Let's focus on that, and I will answer every question that you have. I will help you in the best way that I can. And by taking that time and being patient with them, you have now set the standard for them, right? Now they know this was a positive experience with a nurse, and this is how they should be going forward. And I think we can really make an impact and build bridges across specialties, right? Whether it's physicians, RTs, physical therapists, whatever it is. If we're orienting somebody or we're working with somebody, teaching them something, if we slow down and take that time, I think we can build bridges that aren't there or that need to be rebuilt.
Good. And what kind of information do you share with me as an EMT? But like, do you change the information you share when it comes to, say, me or paramedic AF or, say, another nurse? Like, is there just a broad spectrum of lessons that you can teach across the field, and ones that you choose that's probably not right for the situation, but it's right for here?
Right, and that's a challenge that somebody who works as a nurse, especially I'm a board certified emergency nurse, and I've worked in nothing but critical care in my nursing experience, right? And a challenge is when I get on to an ambulance, having to separate that out from what my EMT basic skills are, right? Those two bleed over, but when you talk about your clinical skills, you have to separate that out, because I can't do a lot of the stuff that I do as a nurse as an EMT. And I precept new EMTs, and I also precept nurses, right? New nurses, nursing students. And I think when I do my education, I do try to tailor it. Like if we're talking about EMS, I try to focus on the EMS side of things, right? I try to keep it at a level that non-EMTs can still understand it, but I do try to tailor that. And if I'm working on something, I'm talking about something nursing related, nursing is a very specific skill set, and not just skills, but like we do a holistic approach, right? Paramedic R.N. John Smith had talked about this, his transition from paramedic to RN. He understood very quickly that nurses look at the whole thing, right? We look at preventative care, we look at after you leave the hospital care, and whereas paramedics are focused totally on that one moment in time, right? They're not worried about preventative health. They're not worried about what happens after they get discharged. Nursing does that, right? So when I teach nurses, I definitely take a different approach. And when I teach EMS, I try to tailor that message for them. It sometimes bleeds over, just by nature of what we do, but I do try to separate it out.
Good. I think that's a very holistic approach. I mean, there are a lot of things that when they do bleed over, for one, we're pre-hospital EMTs, right? We're getting things ready for you guys. So if you can say, hey, we need you to do this because when you get here to us, we do this. So the bleed over is essentially necessary. And a lot of people, that's need to know information. You're right. It's need to know, and I need to know it in order to make the best choice for my patient that I can. Mm-hmm. And we should always be patient advocates to the point of, let's not hold the information because you think I don't need to know it. Let's just teach the information and then let the person decide whether or not they can use it or not. So,
right.
All right. To kind of close out and end this out, I have 5 rapid fire questions for you that are just meant to be like easy going.
Okay.
Coffee before shift or after?
Before.
Before? Why?
It's just my routine. I've been at it for so long. The first thing I do in the morning is make a cup of coffee. That's just part of my routine.
Never coffee after?
No. I do have decaf. Sometimes like I just crave, like on a cold fall day or winter day, I'll crave that hot coffee taste. So I'll do decaf in the afternoons or evenings, but never full strength.
Good. First concert you ever went to?
Oh man. Well, that's I got dragged to concerts as a kid. The first concert I went to of my own accord was 1993. I went to go see Butthole Surfers, and opening for them was Stone Temple Pilots because they had not made it big yet. So they were opening for them. So I got to see them too.
That's great stuff. There are 2 bands that I love a lot. So awesome. One piece of gear or tech you can't live without?
Oh, my stethoscope. Gotta have
stethoscope. Is there? What do you think about the $300 ones, like the ones that like amplify stuff?
I have one.
Do you?
And the reason I have one of those is because I have some hearing loss, and I'm not able to hear very good with the traditional stethoscopes. And so I ended up getting one of these because it's not air coming through the tubes. Those earpieces are basically like AirPods. Mm-hmm. And they're all digital in there, and so it really amplifies the sound, and it actually gives me a rhythm as well. So when I put it on their chest, it gives me a 1-lead rhythm string, which is great, and it gives me the heart rate as well, so I can verify that.
The whole connecting it to your phone and watching the rhythm on your phone, is that gimmicky to you, or do you think it's actually useful?
I think it can be useful. I don't think it's useful for me as a clinician in the emergency department. I think the newer one is great because I don't have to connect to my phone. It literally puts it right there on the stethoscope head. I don't have to connect to my phone at all. It'll actually give me the rhythm strip right there on their chest, and that I appreciate. And also it allows me to switch between lungs and heart, so I can hear clearly just the heart and the lungs, and I can select that, and I love that. For me, it's a wonderful tool. I know a lot of people don't like it or don't think it's necessary, but if you have any degree of hearing loss and you have trouble hearing with a traditional stethoscope, I think it can be a very valuable tool.
Do you have a brand in mind that you wouldn't mind saying out loud, maybe dropping it in the comments?
Well, I have the Echo 500, right? And the only reason I will tell you that I have that is because we thought one of our kids was going to need braces this year because they told us he was going to need braces. So we set that money aside in an FSA, and the orthodontist goes, nah, he's good. He doesn't need it. So now my wife's like, well, we've got this money for, what do you need? And I was like, I could use a new stethoscope. She goes, well, get it. We got to use it or we're going to lose it. So I got the new stethoscope. Otherwise, I would not have gotten that. It was just one of those, happy circumstances for me.
That's perfect. I'm glad you got it though, because it's one of those like lifetime investments that is just going to work.
Yes. Yep.
Alrighty. One word to describe Beyond the Call Lights.
Honest.
Honest. All right, guys. Well, you have heard it here. This has been Tales from the Tailboard podcast with Isaac Poteet, my guest, Gary, the ER nurse. Thank you for being on, sir. I have really, really appreciated your insight on things, and thank you for being a part of it today.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. I know we've talked about we have our differences, but one of the things that I think I admire about you is that you are respectful about those differences and you are willing to hear other people's side of it, and that is something that is lacking today, and it's something that I admire about you and I appreciate greatly.
Well, thank you, sir. Hopefully other people see the same, and we'll just continue making content and pushing it out to the world.
Outstanding.
All right. Thank you, guys. See you on the next one. I'll see you soon.
Dispatch, medic 1, show medic 1 en route.